Well, what happened was not what he predicted, but not nothing. And that was the great puzzlement of this experience, because what happened was immediately after this procedure was carried out, I could tell that something had changed in me. And it was very hard. It took me a few hours to figure out what it was. And what it was it was though a switch had been thrown. And I began to understand. That's all it was. It was, Whitehead defines understanding as the apperception of pattern as such. And suddenly, I began seeing things very differently. I began to see the relationships between things on one level and among levels. And I stopped sleeping. I didn't sleep for 11 days, effortlessly. And every night during this 11 days, in the late evening, I would just become very, very impatient for all these people to go to bed, my companions, because the chatter of the camp would interrupt my thoughts. And what I just wanted to do was I would just go in the jungle and I would just put my hand on a tree and I would just stand and think. And think and think and think and think. And it was this endless cascade. It was not like a psychedelic trip. There was no hallucination. There was simply this unfoldment. And it was like as though I was just filled to overflowing with gnosis. I would sit down on this ground and begin thinking, and I would lose myself in my thoughts. And when I would come back to my situation, I would look down in front of myself and see that while I had been thinking, my hands had built a fire out of small sticks. It was as though everything was cognitive activity. Dennis went what would be conventionally called a psychotic episode, but it wasn't a typical psychotic episode. It was a kind of turning inside out, so that he became, in a single moment after the hypercarbylation, it was like he ended up at the other end of the universe, turned inside out and headed backwards. And over the next 14 days, he came through a progressive narrowing of his what he was identifying with, so that first it was the whole universe, then it was the galaxy, then the solar system, then each of the planets moving in, then all life on Earth, then all mammals, then all human beings, then all Irish, then finally all the McKennas there ever were, and then finally the question was he him or me? And then he got that sorted out finally, and then he was fine. Shaken, but fine. We've now reached the 22nd of March, 1971, and I was just, I couldn't talk to anybody. I was in a very, 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 very strange place. I mean, things went on. Well, just as an example, because there wasn't much of this 3D stuff that you could wrap your mind around, but everything was teaching me. Everything had a message for me. And I would go out into the jungle, and I would raise my arms above my head, and I would call the butterflies into me out of the jungle, and they would come, first by dozens and then by hundreds. And I would stand there, and here's how the thought progression would go. I would call the butterflies in, and then it would move me to tears. And so there I am standing, covered with butterflies, tears of joy streaming down my face. and streaming down my face and streaming down my face. And finally I begin thinking, so now what? And then I think, the people back at the camp who doubt me, those bastards, wait till they see this. So then I would go to the camp, and I would be smiling, the tiny smile that only Buddhas can manage, and I would invite them into the jungle to see something unannounced. And so they would say, well, I don't know, you're just, all right, we'll go. So then we would go into the jungle, and I would raise my hands above my head, and I would call the butterflies in, and none would come. And these people would just say, oh, God, it's getting worse and worse and worse. Your brother is nuts. You have delusions of grandeur. This is pathetic. I mean, this is a mind in wreckage. This is the green hell. This is the thing we feared the most, you know? And so eventually, and any of you who are self-diagnosed as schizophrenic will agree with me on this, I'm sure. The key to surviving schizophrenia in one piece and avoiding massive intervention by the mental health care authorities is shut up. Shut up about it. Do not talk about it. Of course you can raise the dead and heal the sick and divine distant event, but just shut up about it, or you're not going to make it through. Well, eventually everybody else sort of renegotiated themselves back to some kind of reality. My brother flew back to the States, and I was, in a sense, left in the Amazon to mull all this.